Hello and welcome to the webinar on food safety in organic poultry. My name is Alice Formiga and I'm the webinar coordinator for eOrganic. eOrganic is the organic agriculture community of practice with eExtension. You can find all of our published articles, videos, and our many upcoming and recorded webinars on organic farming and research topics on our website at extension.org/organic_production. We're very pleased to welcome our team of speakers today. We have Irene Hanning-Jarquin of the University of Tennessee, who is speaking with us today all the way from Nicaragua. So we noticed that there are sometimes occasional problems where her sound gets cut off. So we will let her know if that happens, but please bear with us if it does. It seems to be working fine, but every now and then that can happen. So we just wanted to forewarn you. And we also have Sandra Diaz Lopez, also of the University of Tennessee, and she's speaking with us from Tennessee. So I'm going to just advance at the beginning of their presentation here, and then I'm going to hand the presentation over to our first speaker, who's going to be Sandra. So Sandra, you should have control of the slides now.
Thank you very much, Alice, and good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I would like to start talking about the importance of the USDA as responsible of the inspection and grading to enforce the standards for of meat, poultry, and eggs that are produced in U.S. One of the most important missions of the USDA is the coordination of several strategic plans that maintain and keep pathogens and residues out of poultry and poultry meat, like also Salmonella outbreaks or egg recalls. But we know that every year the United States reports more than 76 million cases of foodborne illnesses, with more than 325,000 hospitalizations and 5,000 deaths are reported. But also, according to the Economic Research Service of the USDA, the annual economic cost of the foodborne illnesses is about more than $152 billion. We know that chicken is one of the most popular meats because of several factors like the short production cycle, also the low price, and also because it's an integrated production. And as we can see in this pie chart, is also identified as one of the foods more linked to the appearance of outbreaks in United States. As we can see, at least 90% of the food linked to outbreaks are because of the consumption of poultry, also fish, followed by beef, leafy vegetables, and pork. But for the food industry, the appearance of food recalls are very costly, and not only economically, also because of the reduction of consumers' confidence in the food supply, and also because of the loss of its reputations. The USDA Food Safety and Inspection Service is the organism that is responsible to provide updates of these food recalls to the public. But every time consumers are becoming more vigilant about the quality and safety of what they are eating, and every time demanding more fresh and natural food. And this is very important because consumer had changed the lifestyle, for example, eating more outside at restaurants, and also with the global food markets becoming more common, it makes that the food supplies grows very quick, and not only in size, also in the distribution of the food products. All these epidemiological factors are really important because, as we can see in this map, contaminated food can be easily dispersed, affecting the entire country, making more difficult to trace back the source of contaminations. As we can see here, the states that are in red show with the rapid distribution of a Salmonella typhimurium multi-state outbreak due to the consumption of contaminated eggs in 2009 that affect to more than 1,800 people that make them sick. For example, the states in yellow reported cases of listeria, and orange states reported cases of E. coli. The states that appear in gray didn't report any outbreak of foodborne illnesses from food contaminated. One of the goals for the public health and the food safety officials is to prevent the appearance of these kind of outbreaks. But it's very difficult because long-term prevention of foodborne outbreaks takes the action of many partners in the food production chain, as we can see in this chart. And some prevention measures have to be taken at each level because microbial contamination can occur in any of these steps from farm to consumer during production, processing, distribution, or preparation. And this is very important because because once the product is contaminated and the food is not well cooked, it can make an outbreak more likely to occur. As I mentioned before, it's very critical to implement preventive measures during pre-harvest operations that include all the procedures that are taken on farm before the products are ready to be sold, but also during processing, when transformation of raw products into food, and also finally during the post-harvest operations, when those products are prepared for storage or are processed for by cleaning, cooling, or also packaging. The great majority of foodborne illnesses have been associated to the presence of bacteria such E. coli, Salmonella, Campylobacter jejuni, Listeria monocytogenes, and Clostridium, and also viruses as hepatitis A, norovirus, and parasites as Trichinella spiralis. Maintain the food safety system have a big economic impact because most of these foodborne infections become associated with the loss of productivity, but also medical care, and make increase the cost for the industry in order to improve the control measures. As an example, Salmonella and Campylobacter are frequently associated to poultry and poultry products and have an economic impact on the industry about of 14.6 and 18.8 billion of dollars per year, respectively. The annual economic cost of illness caused by E. coli 015787 is also very high and is estimated in at least 3.3 billion of dollars per year. One of the most important pathogens linked to food infections or illnesses is Campylobacter, and is mainly found colonizing poultry intestine as a commensal, and considered as one of the most common causes of food illnesses in the United States, and also the second cause of foodborne bacterial illnesses, because probably it needs a very low infection dose to cause illness. But since the vast majority of cases occur as isolated events and is not recognized as an outbreak most of the times, this makes more difficult to trace back the source of contamination of Campylobacter in food. The most typical symptoms are associated with mild gastroenteritis and usually appear after 3 or 5 days after incubation. This is a very long period of incubation that sometimes the patient doesn't remember what they eat, and then it's more difficult to trace back the source of contamination of Campylobacter. Usually it's a mild self-limiting disease that can cause diarrhea, vomiting, cramping, and also bloody stool. And most of the persons that are infected with Campylobacter can be recovered without any specific treatment, and only antimicrobial therapy is recommended for patients with severe disease or those patients that have a high risk for severe disease. The other important foodborne pathogen is Salmonella. Salmonella is considered like a group of bacteria that is widely distributed in the intestine of domestic animals and colonizing poultry, cattle, and swine. It's mainly found in poultry and poultry products as a leading cause of foodborne bacterial illnesses. As an example, the FoodNet surveillance network identified in 2008 or reported an incidence of 16.2 cases of salmonellosis per year. But it seems that only per one case that is reported, is estimated that 28 cases were not diagnosed. So this is very important when we have to implement active surveillance measures of these pathogens. One of the differences with Campylobacter is that Salmonella is much more aggressive and needs, although it needs a high infectious dose, it can cause very serious illnesses in older adults, also children and persons with chronic diseases. Usually the symptoms last 2 or 3 days and tend to be self-limiting diseases that also can cause diarrhea, vomiting, and cramping. Most of the people get better without treatment, but the antibiotic therapy is available and recommended in most of the cases. The importance of Salmonella in poultry and poultry products is because in the US, more than 145 outbreaks have been occurred in the last 10 years, and all of them have been tracing back to poultry and poultry products. More than 77% of these outbreaks were linked to Salmonella enteritidis, and all of them were associated with grade A cell X or egg-containing foods. In this point, the CDC estimates that more than 75% of all the Salmonella outbreaks were due to the consumption of raw or not well cooked grade A eggs. In general, the annual rates of bacteria can fluctuate moderately, but that means that current measures doesn't reflect the substantial change on the progress report. As we can see in this table, the percentage change in 2012 compared with the 2006 and 2008, we can see that Campylobacter increased at least 14%. Meantime, Escherichia coli, Listeria, and Salmonella did not change very much. So in this view, to control all these pathogens, new programs must be adopted, at least in all the steps during the production, processing, and preparation of foods. But this is very difficult because the farm environments cannot be sterile, and only a small fraction of poultry houses, hens, and eggs can be tested every time. So in this view, more efforts to control foodborne pathogens need to be more proactive and focusing on risk reduction and prevention. On farm, and since the foodborne pathogens colonize poultry intestines and travel from place to place in manure, dust, feeders carried by air on people, equipment, vehicles, animals, and other birds, the preventive measures must be taken on each step during the production chain. Now I give the floor to Dr. Hanning, who will give more insights about the food safety operations in poultry production.
Thank you, Sandra. I'm going to stay on this slide, and then the rest of the presentation will address are intervention measures. And the way this part of the presentation is organized is we'll go through the production chain from pre-harvest processing to post-harvest. So as Sandra mentioned, Campylobacter and Salmonella are two important pathogens associated with poultry. And one of the reasons that this happens is because Salmonella and Campylobacter can colonize the intestines of the chicken without causing disease. So if the chickens are infected, we don't know because they don't have any symptoms. Although they aren't beneficial to the birds, it's sort of similar to the situation with us where we're colonized by lactobacillus, and lactobacillus doesn't cause any illness to us. So for this reason, during processing, if the intestinal contents are ruptured, the outside of the carcass can become contaminated with the pathogens, and thus people are more susceptible to illness. It's a higher risk. So as I mentioned, we're going to start with pre-harvest food safety. And so we'll talk about pre-harvest food safety initially on the farm. The reason being is that the idea is if we can reduce Salmonella and Campylobacter contamination on the farm, then the risk through the production chain should be decreased. Although it should be, you should be aware that there are potential to contaminate the food all throughout the production chain. So in this diagram, I've listed a few of the control efforts and intervention measures that can be used in the different parts of the process. At pre-harvest, we have antimicrobials, vaccines, and probiotics. And we're going to go a little more into detail about those later on in the presentation. Post-harvest as well, things like packaging and keeping the food at the proper temperature will also control pathogen contamination. And there are some types of measures that can be used in processing, such as antimicrobials and, again, temperature. At the final step in this process, the consumer, education is key to reducing risk of foodborne pathogens. So on the farm, there are a number of sources of pathogens. Personnel. People can carry the pathogen on their shoes and then contaminate the farm and the poultry houses. There are vectors such as rodents, insects, and birds, and these also can carry contamination. And also the feed. Feed is a primary source of contamination, and it's important to keep the feed in a closed environment so that mice can't get to the feed, because mice can be also colonized with salmonella, and when they get into the feed, the droppings can contaminate the feed, and then the birds eat it, and they're subsequently colonized. Water can also be an important source of pathogens, depending on the source of the water. Some people like to use outside ponds and irrigate, and because this water is open to the environment, it's a little more easier to contaminate. City water is probably the safest source of water. So some of the intervention measures I have listed here for pre-harvest. Clean feed, as we discussed in the previous slide, is a pretty important measure. Pest management, keeping rodents away and keeping insects away from the poultry houses, and then water treatments as well. Biosecurity is a term that we use to keep the pathogens and help keep pathogens out of the poultry houses. And the best biosecurity measures that can be implemented involve training and educating the personnel about how they may carry bacteria into the poultry houses. So some of the challenges in biosecurity that organic producers have is the fact that these birds are reared outside in a pasture. Some do have a pen for the birds where the birds can go inside and get out of the sun, or nesting boxes and those kinds of things. But the problem is that the birds aren't in a house as in conventional production. And for that reason, they come into contact, or can come into contact, with vectors, including birds and rodents. And this makes biosecurity a little more of a challenge within an organic production. Another challenge would be rearing birds in a heavily populated area as opposed to a more rural area, because you have more people traveling around, and thus there's more potential to contaminate your stock. Rotation of the birds at a all-in, all-out type of system bear risks as well. In a rotation type of system, there are always birds inside the house. And one might have, for example, 3 different houses where birds are kept for 2 weeks, and then birds are moved every 2 weeks to different houses, and new birds are brought in to the first house. Sorry, I advanced too many slides. So, as we discussed earlier about vector controls, some of the things that can be used are rodent bait stations
Unmuted.
to control rodents, light traps to control insects, and then also using types of things to help keep away wild birds.
Muted.
So now we're going to get a little more specific about pre-harvest control measures on the farm. Prevention of human illness is key, and the problem is that Salmonella and Campylobacter not only cause acute illness, but they may cause long-term illnesses such as reactive arthritis. So even though antibiotics may be useful to treat humans, they're retroactive. And this means that even though you've gotten Salmonella and you've gotten, for example, treated with antibiotics, you're still at risk to get those long-term illnesses. And thus, prevention is the key to reducing the long-term consequences and the prevention of chronic diseases. So some of the strategies on the farm that we've tried are antibiotics, probiotics, prebiotics, vaccines, direct-fed antimicrobials, and botanicals. For organic producers, antibiotics are not allowed, and so we'll talk a little bit more about the rest of those strategies. As I mentioned, antibiotics are not allowed to be used subtherapeutically, but therapeutically they are. In fact, you're supposed to treat sick animals, but since those birds have been treated with antibiotics, they're no longer allowed to be marketed as organic products. Vaccines are also available only for Salmonella. Currently, there are no vaccines available for Campylobacter, but researchers are working.
Unmuted. Irene, we temporarily lost your sound, so maybe let's just wait one moment, because Irene was having a little trouble with her headset earlier. So Irene, yeah, there you are. Okay. You're back now, Irene? Just a moment. We still can't hear you. So if you could just try unplugging and plugging back in the headset. We'll see what happens. Okay, Irene's with us from Nicaragua, so she had a little trouble with her connection before, but it was coming back, so it only seemed to last a minute or so that she was disconnected. So let's see if we can just wait for her to come back for just a moment. Irene, I don't know if you can hear us, but we can't hear you at the moment. So just we'll ask for your patience for a minute. Let's see. Sandra, I don't know if you want to chime in the meantime while we try to get Irene back. Okay. You can unmute your mic, maybe.
Hi.
Oh, there you are. There's Sandra. You want to talk for a minute while Irene's trying to come back here?
Yeah, sure. Well, Irene was talking about the strategies for on-farm control. She was talking about vaccines that there are some available against Salmonella, and also researchers are working on the development of the vaccine for Campylobacter. Also, other strategies, the use of probiotics like Lactobacillus, Bifidobacterium, or Bacillus, and also the use of prebiotics like fructooligosaccharides or alfalfa. In fact, the prebiotics, it seems that as feed antimicrobial, it are working very good as direct when you add in them directly on feed. And in combination with the probiotics, they can be used as a good strategy to avoid the colonization of Salmonella and Campylobacter of poultry. Also, direct feed antimicrobials like organic acids are being tested right now in poultry production, and also botanicals like plant extracts like yerba mate or grapeseed extracts are also being tested in poultry. The thing is that most of the botanicals, the plant extracts, or the prebiotics, researchers, we have to work a little bit more on them, because most of the time the poultry, they don't like the smell or the flavor of these plants, botanicals, and usually although are working very good in vitro, we also have to work to a little bit more for in vivo experiments to see how we can apply them on feed, in poultry feed.
Okay, Irene, are you back by any chance? Let's see if we can hear Irene. Okay, well, I'm just going to go on, and then Irene, if you can hear us and you come back. I heard her for a second, and then it vanished again. So let's just hope that she can get back with us. But in the meantime, I'll just advance to the next slide so we can continue on here.
Okay, as we can see, the probiotics mostly can be delivered in the water or in the feed, but prebiotics mostly are delivered in feed. They are more stable in feed. Also, direct feed antimicrobials can be added on feed or on water, and botanicals can be added on feed. The thing is that the way to apply these prebiotics or probiotics most of the times makes difference on farmers. For example, if they can choose how to apply these strategies, they would prefer to do it in a very easy way, not very complicated, and find the way to do it also stable and is still difficult.
Are you there, Irene, by any chance? Okay, let's just keep going if we can, and she'll join us as soon as
Sure.
she is able.
I cannot move the control.
Okay, yeah, I've got them, but I just advanced to the next one. So, yeah, okay, you want me to go to the next one? Here we go.
I have, yeah.
Okay, looks like Irene just came back. Are you there, Irene?
I'm back.
Oh, good. Okay, yay.
Sorry.
Sorry about that. Okay, yeah, well, I'm glad you're back. So do you want to go back to the last slide, or do you want to, because I have to give you the control again, so, or we want to just start up right here?
We can continue as long as Sandra's given all the information for the last slides. It's fine.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
Okay, all right, so I'll start from this one then. This is a processing plant in an organic facility, and it's fairly basic. So over here to the left we have the killing cones, and this is the skull tank, and the plucker is over off the side of the picture. You can't see it. After they are finished slaughtering the birds, they're passed through the window here, and then there's the window there, and the birds are cleaned and chilled. So in this type of a system, you can see how it's going to be a little more difficult, or it can be a little more difficult to go through and prevent any kind of contamination and processing. There are processing interventions that can be used even in that type of an organic system, though. Treatments like temperatures, scalding, and chilling, those types of extreme temperatures, are good ways to eliminate pathogens from the outside of the carcasses. Some chemicals can be used, but in organic production we have to be careful because some chemicals are not allowed to be used. So all natural chemicals, such as lactic acid, are allowed to be used, as well as natural extracts like citruses and herbs. The only caveat with those types of intervention treatments is that it tends to leave a flavor on the bird, and so some people don't like to use those. Good agricultural practices are conditions and practices that are necessary for the manufacturing, processing, packaging, and storage of foods to ensure its safety and wholesomeness. GAP certification can be done through the USDA, and so I would recommend going to your USDA inspector or local extension agent to get more information about using GAP. So overall, the general idea of a GAP, though, is the minimum standards to ensure safety, not only microbiological but chemical safety. They control diseases, improves hygiene, and the good agricultural practices are used within the buildings and the facility and on the farm. Another system that we use is called HACCP, in addition to good agricultural practices. And HACCP was created in 1960 to provide safe food for a space expedition. HACCP involves making a plan with analysis and control of biological and physical hazards. Tools to reduce and eliminate or control these hazards to acceptable levels. HACCP plans are mandatory for meat and juice producers, but this depends on the volume of production. Some producers do not have mandatory inspectors depending on how much they're actually producing. So HACCP is a good tool, but it's not mandatory for some. And what HACCP does is looks at the critical points within the production where contamination might occur and figures out ways. You have a plan where you figure out ways to control those pathogens. So for large producers, broiler plants, the USDA does have regulations concerning Salmonella and Campylobacter. Those regulations include sampling 51 birds, and of those 51, 21 samples or fewer can be positive for Campylobacter. The regulation for Salmonella is much tighter. Only 5 samples out of those 51 can be positive. Now this is if you're slaughtering in a big plant. These regulations may not apply to small producers. And just for some info, E. coli has no tolerance and it's considered an adulterant. But E. coli typically isn't a problem in poultry production. So the last part in the food production chain is the consumer. And the consumer can be a big issue when it comes to poultry, because poultry is a little more risky than other foods. And here I have a slide showing you that the number of cases per 100,000 of foodborne illness increases linearly with people not washing their cutting boards. This may seem pretty obvious to a lot of people, but others don't have the education behind them to know that if you don't wash your cutting board and you put vegetables on the cutting board after you cut meat, you've increased your risk of foodborne illness. So getting words out and education to consumers is very important at preventing foodborne illness. Things like proper preparation of food, the correct time and temperature are very important at the home. Raw ingredients, especially poultry and other animal products, may carry biological agents for the reasons that we talked about earlier. So washing your hands, equipment, and the products are very important and can lower the risk. And as we saw in the previous slide, using separate tools, utensils, even areas to process animal products and vegetables prevents cross-contamination. So these are some of just a few of the important food safety points for consumers. And I believe that's the last slide. Thank you.
Unmuted.
Okay, we now have plenty of time left for questions from the audience. And so just in case any of you missed the very beginning of the presentation, you can use the question box on your screen to type in questions and then hit return. And if you don't see the question box, you can click the small plus sign next to the word question and that will open it up. We would also very much appreciate it if you could fill out our follow-up survey, which you'll be receiving in an email later today. And I also wanted to mention that next week we'll be having another webinar on food safety and organic leafy greens presented by Sadhana Ravishankar of the University of Arizona. So if you're interested in food safety in other production systems and poultry, you may be interested in attending that. That's a research webinar. This webinar is being recorded and you'll be able to find the webinar on our website, and I'll pull up the link for that in just a moment. And if you have additional questions at the end of the webinar about organic poultry production in general, let's see, let me just get that link. You can use the e-extension Ask an Expert service, and the link to that is on your screen. So with that, let's get started with the questions. So let me just pull those up. Okay, we had, I guess, a question on whether you know which types of rat baits are approved for use in organic certification systems. And then this person mentioned one called Quintox and was wondering what that was. Do you have any comments on different ways that you can control rats in organic poultry?
Wow, that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know specifically the regulations on these, so I wouldn't want to mislead you. But my understanding is that as long as the birds don't come in contact with the chemicals, anything should be fine. So as long as the chemicals are not or in a safe place and the rats can get to them but the birds can't, it should be okay. But you need to check with your local extension agent, or you can use the link that Alice has given you here on the question to ask an expert on that.
It would probably be also very good to check with your organic certifier before using any substance on your farm. So we had a couple questions about prebiotics and probiotics. One was wondering what an example of a prebiotic is, and another person was wondering how often you give those to birds and at what age.
Okay, so probiotics are the, most people know this, they're the beneficial bacteria that we feed directly to the birds. Prebiotics are indigestible substances like cereals or other grains that the probiotic bacteria can use as a source of nutrients, but the birds can't. For that reason, you're basically feeding the good bacteria and you're enhancing their growth. You're selecting for those. Different manufacturers of these products have recommendations and different recommendations. Prebiotics, though, in general, prebiotics are delivered in the feed for the entire rearing period. Probiotics are a little bit different, and typically they're delivered once or twice, or maybe for a 3-day period at hatch. So probiotics don't have to be given continuously throughout the rearing period. An example of a prebiotic might be like a fructoooligosaccharide or mannose. Mannose is a very popular one right now in poultry, and I believe I gave some examples of probiotics such as lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. We've used those in some of our research, and there are advantages and disadvantages, as Sandra mentioned from the slide. Probiotics aren't always consistently effective. They're very good for promoting growth, but as far as preventing Salmonella and Campylobacter colonization, we've gotten inconsistent results. It works sometimes and it doesn't always work. Now, prebiotics, because they're supposed to promote the growth of the beneficial bacteria, you would think if I give my birds probiotics and prebiotics, I should enhance the probiotic activity. And this is really dependent on which probiotic and prebiotic you use. So synergism doesn't always occur, and we've been doing some research recently to come up with a great combination of probiotics and prebiotics.
Okay, I just wanted to go back to the last question. We got a comment, thank you very much, from an organic inspector, and he said that rat and mouse baits cannot be used inside an organic facility, mechanical only, and baited traps must be outside. So thank you very much for that comment. That's very helpful. We had a comment from someone who noted that when your audio had gone out that time, that we never really covered the post-harvest slide very well. So if you could talk a little bit more about that, and I'll just kind of...
yeah, let's go back to that one.
I think we're up here.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the pre-harvest control. Yeah.
Okay, before that pre-harvest. Okay, yeah, because that's where we lost control.
Yeah, we lost this one.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah, it was this one right here that I think we never got to. Yeah, so we kind of skipped through that really fast. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do I have control of the...
You don't, but I can give it to you. So let me just bear with us here. Yeah, well, we have you back now. So okay. All right.
Okay.
So Irene, now you have the control.
Okay. I'm going to go back up to where I lost the audio, and I'll find that slide. Because these are really good intervention measures to use, and there's been a lot of research now in them. Because one of the things that we see is that antibiotics aren't very popular with consumers for obvious reasons, and it's also creating antibiotic-resistant bacteria. So people are interested in using alternatives to these. Let me think.
I think we've gone back too far. Yeah.
Did I go back too far?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, okay. There we go. This one, right?
I think so, yeah.
So I listed the strategies for on-farm control, and these are listed here. As I mentioned, antibiotics cannot be used in poultry, organic poultry production. But probiotics, prebiotics, botanicals, and direct-fed antimicrobials are very popular and can be used. So I'm going to discuss those a little bit more detail. Probiotics, as I have listed here, Lactobacillus, Bifidobacterium, and Bacillus are the most popular bacteria that are used. Prebiotics, like fructooligosaccharides in alfalfa, and then direct-fed antimicrobials, including organic acids. Now, these are used because most pathogens, Salmonella and Campylobacter that we're concerned with, are sensitive to pH. So directly feeding the birds organic acids, basically acidifying the water, helps to prevent Salmonella and Campylobacter from colonizing. Botanicals are also more popular now. These include plant extracts and grapeseed extracts. However, the efficacy of botanicals is kind of like probiotics. It's a little bit inconsistent, and how they work, we really don't know. So botanicals are still considered a little bit like witchcraft. Okay. So probiotics, as I mentioned earlier, are delivered typically in the feed or water, depending on the bacterium. Prebiotics are almost always delivered in the feed, which is nice because producers don't have to change any of their production methods. The prebiotics just get either mixed into the feed or directly milled even. And direct-fed antimicrobials depend on whether it's the feed or the water. It depends on which antimicrobial you're using. Botanicals, like prebiotics, are almost always delivered in the feed. So the advantages and disadvantages of these. Probiotics improve weight gain, stimulate the immune system, and help to exclude pathogens, but they may produce inconsistent results. Prebiotics, as we talked about, can create synergism when used in combination with probiotics. One of the problems that we have or see with prebiotics is adjusting the inclusion rate. So typically what I've seen on commercial prebiotics is an inclusion rate of about 0.2%. But you can go up to about 5% on an inclusion rate without interfering with the nutrients of the feed. Some prebiotics the birds don't like. Chickens, interestingly enough, have a very discerning palate and don't always care for the flavor of some of the feed additives. This is the same problem with direct-fed antimicrobials. When we acidify the water with certain organic acids, especially something like tannic acid. Tannic acid has a very strong odor and a very strong flavor, and so the birds don't like it. And this may, for obvious reasons, decrease weight gain. They don't like the taste of it, and so they won't eat it. Botanicals is also the same issue, flavor, but adjusting the inclusion rate can also be a little bit difficult with botanicals. So this might just take a little bit of trial and error to see exactly what inclusion rate is the best.
Okay, I think this is where you pretty much caught up. And we do have a couple of questions about disinfection. So one of them is a comment on the use of wood structures in the processing plant. It looked like pressure-treated wood was used as supports for the cleaning table or the wood holding the bleeding cones. This person is wondering about the disinfection of the premises.
This, I visited this farm, I want to say at least 6 or 7 years ago, so I'm not exactly sure what they used for disinfection, But yeah, using a wood structure is probably not ideal because it is porous and can absorb things, pathogens and other bacteria. It might be best to again talk to your local extension agent or your organic certifier to see which chemicals you can and can't use, because some of those chemicals you can't use in organic processing.
Here's another question about disinfecting cutting boards, since so many people don't do it.
Okay.
So after cutting up a raw chicken on my cutting board, how should I wash the cutting board? Just soap and water, okay? Or should I use a dilute chlorine solution? Or what should one do?
So hot soap and water should be just fine. I put my cutting board into the dishwasher because it has a sanitizing cycle. You can also use a 10% bleach solution if you'd like. Just be careful because this can splash onto your clothes and then you've ruined your clothes. But hot soap and water and scrubbing it should be effective. It would work.
Okay. We had a question about, in general, whether organic production is more or less a threat to food safety than non-organic production, and the same with smaller and larger producers. Are you aware of any statistics on that as kind of a general comparison? I mean, I guess both can carry risks potentially, but the question is, do you have any sort of overall comparison?
So we did some research, and I've also looked through the literature. And it seems to not be a function of size of farm or producer, and it's also not a function of organic versus conventional farming. It seems to be a function of the farmer itself or the producer itself and their operation method. So organic can be better, organic can be worse, but it's not a function of that specific factor. It's definitely on the producer.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, this person has a question that I've read about the vacuum extraction of organs increases the risk of intestinal rupturing and contamination. Have you heard of this research, and do you have a comment on that?
I haven't seen any vacuuming used in the operations that I've been to. The big broiler plants, they use the evisceration method is sort of like a knife, and the carcasses are on a machine with a paddle, and the paddle sort of reaches into the carcass and pushes the intestines out. And then in the organic production, it's all done by hand that I've seen. It would make sense that using a vacuum would increase rupture, but as far as my specific experience, I don't have a lot of experience with that. I'm not sure if Sandra has. Have you seen this, Sandra?
No, I never seen that.
Okay.
Okay. So several people are wanting to go back to specific slides, and I just want to mention that we have uploaded the presentation as a PDF file to the registration page for the webinar. So I just wanted to pull up the link for that again. You can actually just go to our general webinar archive right here, and then you'll be able to find a link to this particular webinar, and then you'll be able to find the slides uploaded as a PDF file. So if there's some that you want to go back and look at later, yeah, do feel free to do that. And then also we've recorded the presentation, so you could actually listen to something again as well. So I just wanted to mention that for those people who wanted to look at particular slides. There are a couple people that are questioning about specific disinfection substances. So for example, here's one about whether you know where somebody might be able to get information about lactic acid use as an antimicrobial dip. For example, the correct concentration or the length of time of contact and that type of thing.
So I think that kind of depends too on the volume of birds you're using. So lactic acid, I think they do use that in some processing plants. I've seen it used. I think the concentration is fairly low though, because it can wind up causing a off flavor on the meat, and then it also can cause discoloration. And so, yeah, getting the right concentration is key. I would suggest using your link about asking the organic farming questions, the Ask Extension link that you have there, because there's different ones, and so as far as specifics for the volume of water they're using, the volume of birds, I think that that those details are essential to figuring out exactly what type or what concentration you want to use.
Okay, I guess we have two questions about using apple cider vinegar or acetic acid or citric acid in the water supply. Do you know where you could find more information about that?
You can probably find more information, once again, using your link. I know apple cider vinegar is very popular in organics. I've seen a lot of producers using that. Once again, with using the organic acids, you just have to be aware that acidifying the water produces a little off flavor, and the birds may not like it. So getting the right concentration is going to be important, especially if you want to produce a good-sized bird. You're going to have some production performance reduction. And I'm not sure if Sandra has any more information about those.
No, I cannot say right now. I mean, the dose or the volume that you have to use in organic. I mean,
okay.
I don't have any.
So yeah, your extension person would probably be the best person to ask about getting more information for those.
Okay. Is apple cider vinegar just used to control coccidiosis, or does it work for other pathogens as well?
It'll work for other pathogens because it acidifies the water, and Salmonella and Campylobacter are acid sensitive.
Okay. Do you have any additional post-harvest comments? Because we actually had talked more about pre-harvest, but do you have any other comments about post-harvest food safety?
So post-harvest probably would include things like transportation. So when you transport the carcasses after they're fully processed, depending on where you're going to sell them, I've seen producers that sell to their local supermarket, for example, the Whole Foods or something like that. And then other ones prefer to sell at the farmer's market. So proper transportation and keeping the carcasses cold is going to be really important. You want to make sure the carcasses are on ice, or if you have a large amount of birds, some sort of refrigeration, like a refrigerated truck. Keeping them at the proper temperature is going to be key, because once the temperature gets too warm, then the bacteria can grow. And so you've increased the number of organisms on the bird, and then you've increased the risk of getting consumers ill.
Okay. Do cats transmit pathogens? And if not, do you recommend barn cats for natural rodent control?
So that's kind of funny. Here in Nicaragua, that's what cats are primarily used for, as rodent control. The cats here are definitely workers. And yes, since mice carry salmonella and the cats eat the mice, you should be careful about your kids kissing on the cats and those kinds of things, because they can get sick depending on how soon the cat's eaten the mouse. I haven't seen anything in the literature about cats excreting pathogens in their feces, but we know that healthy puppies and healthy dogs do. We know that they carry Campylobacter and Salmonella. So fecal contamination is going to be important.
Okay. Can you comment about the care and cleaning of eggs prior to cracking them or to bringing them home or packing them?
Okay, so some people prefer to use a disinfectant a wash. Some people like to just use soap and water, which is fine too. But taking off any kind of visible fecal contamination is going to be very important because the birds secrete the pathogens in their feces. So if you can see feces, then the risk of contamination is increased significantly. You'll have to be careful once again, since if you're doing organic production, what you wash your eggs with, because some of the chemicals aren't allowed.
Okay. What are some, what kind of home consumer do you recommend that home people that eat eggs disinfect them before they use them?
They don't need to disinfect them as long as the producer has washed them. They just need to make sure that they wash their hands after they've broken the egg and cooked the egg, or before they cook the egg. Any kind of raw contamination of their hands or the counter surfaces, utensils, etc.
Okay, thanks. What are some herbals and botanicals that people have utilized successfully pre-harvest to try to prevent microbial infection?
So I'll let Sandra tell you about some of the research she's done with botanicals. She's used some grapeseed extract and some yerba mate, it's a tea.
Yeah, well, we have been working with grapeseed extract mainly, and we observed that it can work reducing the levels of salmonella contamination in poultry. But we still have to work more on that, because we observe that it's also affecting to the body weight of poultry. So sometimes maybe the inclusion rate of these botanicals or these plant extracts must be well measured before recommend them to the farmers in order to get a good performance of the poultry. But yeah, we are seeing that that some of them works good.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Well, here's a person who mentions that their layer feed used to have oregano oil in it, and could you plant natural, let's see, anti-helminthics in your pasture like oregano to reduce bacterial colonization in the bird's gut? You think that would help?
I don't know specifically if that would work, but I've seen some research with the oregano oil, and it seems to be fairly effective. I think one of the things with botanicals that we've seen, at least, is that the oils and the extracts are much more concentrated. So when we've used yerba mate, which is a tea, and we do use an extract of the yerba mate, which is concentrated, it's very effective. However, when we feed the birds just the raw yerba mate, it loses a lot of effectivity. So we need to use something that's a little more concentrated, but I haven't seen any research specifically using direct oregano. So whether it's effective or not, I don't know.
Okay. Here's a question about whether if you bring in new young birds to your flock, how old do the birds need to be to keep them all safe and healthy? Is this bad practice, or should you keep them separate?
So I'm not sure of the question exactly. Are they saying they already have adult birds?
Yeah.
Or okay, older birds.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question. I'm not a producer, and I've seen different practices. So that's kind of a specific question that would be harder for me to answer. I'm more of a bacteriologist. I'm really not
okay.
a expert on rearing birds. But if Sandra has any information, I don't know, she might know that.
Can you repeat the question, please?
how you should introduce young birds to your new young birds to your flock.
If you already have
Older
adult
bird,
birds,
yeah.
well, most of the recommendations when you are rearing birds is that every time that you want to introduce young birds, it's better to finish with one cycle and then start with a new one in a different moment, because of you know, you have to do the cleaning and the transition for the newly hatching birds. So that's all I know.
We had a comment that somebody recommended quarantining all new birds for at least 30 days before introducing them to the older flock. So that may be from a producer here.
Yeah, yeah, and that's probably a good idea for controlling things like coccidiosis or worms, even bacteria and pathogens, because as I mentioned, with a rotation, it's very difficult to keep, you're perpetuating because you always have birds there. So as Sandra mentioned, if you have a break where you can do cleaning and keep birds separated, it's probably more ideal.
Okay. Here's an interesting comment about barn cats. It said, also be careful of barn cats accessing sheep areas. Apparently, according to this person, they can cause abortions in ewes for those who have more than poultry. That's interesting. Okay.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Can you, Irene, maybe, or Sandra, explain what inclusion rate means?
Go ahead, Sandra.
Well, inclusion rate is the percentage of the, for example, botanical or strat that you have to include in your in the feed of the animals.
So, for example, if you're going to do a 1% inclusion rate, then you would do 1 gram of botanical per 100 grams of feed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any information on, I guess, silage of fish has lactic acid, and apparently it's been being researched in Mexico and California. Do you have any information about that?
Oh, I sure don't. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Does freezing whole birds reduce pathogen populations?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. How long can pathogens live on the surfaces and in the atmosphere?
Depending on the pathogen.
I'm sorry, we couldn't hear that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on the pathogen.
Oh, it depends on the pathogen. Okay. Mm-hmm.
But, and it depends on what surface you're talking about. They're susceptible to desiccation, but we've seen where we can isolate pathogens from the litter 30 days after the birds have been gone from the house. And in the soil, it depends on how close the pathogens are to the sun, because they're susceptible to the UV light. But some studies have shown them to be in the soil for up to 20 days.
Okay. How long do salmonella vaccines last if they were injected in vitro?
So my experience with salmonella vaccines only has to do with broilers. And since broilers are reared for 6 weeks or 13 weeks, it's 6 weeks in conventional and 13, about typically 13 weeks in organic, they typically give 1 vaccine. Now, as far as laying hens go, I'm not sure if vaccination has to be done more than that, because layers are kept for a lot longer.
Okay, here's a question about bird control for pasture-based producers. What kind of bird control methods are best for keeping wild birds away from pastures? And do migratory patterns need to be taken into account when determining where to start a pasture poultry operation?
I think that would probably be a good idea. Wild birds are difficult, especially in a pastured poultry situation. Um, I've seen any kind of basic thing like a scarecrow, and some people use some type of
Devices.
device to make noise, exactly things like that. But that's a really difficult one, especially because if you have your feed out and available, then the wild birds are going to get into the feed. So keeping the feed in some sort of housing facility is probably a good idea too, to help keep the wild birds out.
Okay. Do you have any suggestions on where people can get certified organic prebiotics?
I would send them to the Ask the Organic Farming questions for that one, where they can get those. Most of what we do with prebiotics are non-commercial. And so what we're trying to do is develop prebiotics. We don't usually experiment with non-commercial prebiotics or with commercial prebiotics.
Oh, okay. Okay, and do you have any suggestions other than your organic certifier of where you might find a list of approved organic probiotics?
So probiotics all should be organic since it's just a live microbial bacteria. There shouldn't be any types of chemicals that can't be used in that. It's just a suspension of bacteria.
Okay. Okay, here's someone who suggested that livestock guard dogs can work very well in pastured poultry for avian control, for bird control.
Okay.
And I guess she says that Akbask and Anatolians especially are a menace to birds, or Akbash.
Huh.
So that's interesting. Okay. It looks like we've pretty much finished our questions here. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. And I'd like to thank Irene and Sandra very much for coming and presenting this webinar. And again, if you'd like to ask additional questions, you can use the link on your screen to the eExtension Ask an Expert service. And I know there is a community in addition to the eOrganic community that works on small flocks and organic pastured poultry. So they may be able to help. And I would also appreciate it if you could fill out our follow-up survey that you'll be receiving in an email today. So thank you again, Irene and Sandra, and thanks to everyone for joining us online today.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Okay.
Thank you.